The proposal to build a 400-turbine wind-generating facility in Idaho's Magic Valley has been met with almost unanimous opposition. They are taller than the Washington Monument. They're taller than the Seattle Space Needle.
Provide about $120 million a year for tribal climate adaptation and resilience projects.
We've received 166 proposals from tribes totaling over $150 million for fiscal year 2023.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service issued a rule that included a ban on traditional ammunition. Do you feel that it's prudent to provide funding to localities that intentionally violate federal law?
I don't understand what the question is. When we use the word relocation, it's a little buzzword that gives me a little, bad feeling inside.
They're not the threat for me because I can't shoot very well. I could shoot at them all day long and not hurt one.
Are you aware of a local minor baseball team called the Glacier Riders? Are you aware that your department is in litigation? Yes or no, ma'am?
No, I'm not aware.
Okay.
Microphone on. Good morning and welcome to Secretary Haaland. Thank you for joining us today to discuss the President's fiscal year 2025 budget request for the Department of Interior. Let me start off. This is something you knew was going to come up. I was going to have to comment on. The proposal to build a 400-turbine wind-generating facility in Idaho's Magic Valley has been met with almost unanimous opposition from local residents. These would be the largest wind turbines on land in the United States. They are taller than the Washington Monument. They're taller than the Seattle Space Needle, 400 of them. I have yet to talk to one Magic Valley resident who supports it. Can you walk me through what the agency has done since the enactment of the 2024 bill to adhere to the requirements of the Idaho wind provision? What elected officials stakeholders have you consulted with since March 9th, and what feedback and concerns have they shared with you, and how do you plan to incorporate those concerns before moving forward?
Thank you for the question, Chairman, and appreciate also the conversation that we had yesterday on this issue. So roughly 26 government-to-government consultation meetings with tribes have happened. We've had at least 19 meetings with county commissioners from Lincoln, Jerome, and Minidoka counties, 14 briefings for members of Congress or their staff, 6 meetings with local organizations, 4 meetings with grazing permittees and other members of the agricultural community, 6 public meetings on the draft environmental impact statement, numerous engagements with Japanese American community, and many more. We appreciate your concern and your communication with us, and we're working to meet the direction to conduct additional consultations with local elected officials and stakeholders. This issue is not completed yet. It is ongoing.
Is the department's position that a one-size-fits-all approach to conservation outweighs unique plans that consider and incorporate the specific threats to that locality? And can you explain the department's process leading to the necessity for this proposal, and what is the timing and plan for this proposal?
Thank you very much, Chairman, and it's been my experience with the department that we value very much local input, state input. We feel those folks know better. They live on the land and they know things that we don't know, so we are transparent and very collaborative when it comes to that. With respect to the plan itself, we published a draft EIS for the Greater Sage Grouse Plan in March. The comment period ends this June 13th. We aim to complete a revised plan amendments by the end of this year, 2024. We're working with partners, with BLM identified specific Greater Sage Grouse Plan decisions to consider amending to incorporate new science. All other existing decisions remain in the plans unchanged, and DOI remains committed to reversing the downward trend in greater sage grouse populations on BLM managed lands.
Let me suggest that when this comes out, you need to incorporate not just the comments and stuff and listen to the comments from people, but get together a working group and say, okay, how are we going to implement that if that's the way we're moving forward on this, and what's the impacts going to be, and what are the impacts on onshore energy production and mineral development.
The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Inflation Reduction Act and annual Tribal Climate Resilience Appropriated Funds provide about $120 million a year for tribal climate adaptation and resilience projects. So can you tell us sort of the nationwide need for these funds, specifically in the lower 48, and how many tribes are applying right now?
Thank you very much for the question, and yes, it is, it's definitely an issue, and we are paying attention to it. So, thank you. We've had, of course, a very strong response from Indian country. We've received 166 proposals from tribes totaling over $150 million for fiscal year 2023 funded solicitation, and recently announced the $120 million in awards for 146 projects for 102 tribes and 9 tribal organizations. And it's historically high funding with the help of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act.
Under your watch, on September 16th, 2022, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service issued a rule that included a ban on traditional ammunition, and later took additional steps to further ban traditional ammunition. What scientific evidence was used to support the 2022 final rule to put a ban on traditional ammunition and subsequent actions?
Thank you very much, Congressman, for the question. And so I can start out by saying that the Fish and Wildlife Service is taking a measured approach to evaluate the use of lead on refuge areas. Committed in 2022-23 Hunt Fish Rule to consider the future of lead use based on the large number of public comments received on the issue. We are, of course, it's our job to steward our, the Fish and Wildlife Service to steward our national wildlife refuges, and we are just making sure that we're doing that in a responsible way.
So no scientific research is what I think I heard your answer to be.
We are, the Fish and Wildlife Service is, I mean, yes, we have scientists all over the place studying these things, Congressman, and and I believe
So
that's
is there a
what gave-
specific report that you can point this committee to that caused you to take that action?
I would be very happy to get back with the Fish and Wildlife Service and make sure that they can give you the data that they used in evaluating this
I would be
issue.
very interested to hear that from an organization that is all about science and studies. Just yes or no, do you feel that it's prudent to provide funding to localities that intentionally violate federal law?
I'm not quite, I don't understand what the question is.
Real simple. Should we provide funding to entities or localities that intentionally violate federal law?
Could you be more specific, sir?
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't know.
Do you feel like it's prudent to provide funding to localities that intentionally violate federal law, any federal law?
I couldn't answer that question unless I knew the specific issue.
I mean, there's a
that
whole
you're
host of
talking about.
federal laws. Would you
But-
not expect local?
But of course, we follow the law, Congressman. The Department of the Interior follows the law in everything we do.
And so would you expect that localities would also follow federal law?
I expect every American to follow the laws.
All right, thank you for that. So with that, do you feel the Department of Interior should continue to provide grant funds to tribes that legalize marijuana against federal law?
I suppose it depends, Congressman, on what the grant is used for. If it's a grant to help them combat sea level rise and move their
My question was
communities,
in
that's one
regards.
issue.
My question was in regards to legalizing marijuana on tribal lands. Do you think that we should continue to fund tribal entities that break federal law by legalizing marijuana?
I would imagine if tribes are requesting funds and they fill out the applicable paperwork and make their grant proposals, that they will be reviewed and decided upon.
So what other federal laws would you be in support of local entities breaking?
Congressman, I'm not in support of anyone breaking any laws.
Okay, and so you would not, I think by virtue of that answer, you would not condone continuing to fund local entities that break federal law.
And I would also point, Congressman, that the Justice Department is the department to handle any issues of law breaking, and if we're happy to move to point in that direction if you'd like us to.
Would love to just get your thoughts on how that streamlined authority that exists under the proposal that we've introduced could help your agency and could help tribes actually develop and execute a comprehensive and coordinated plan for climate-driven relocation. And I want to just invite if there are other resources or approaches that you're pursuing toward that end.
Thank you so much for the question. And yes, we talked about this the other day. In fact, it sounds like a very exciting idea. And of course, if we can coordinate and streamline things, that's a win for tribes in this case. So we appreciate that as well as the community-driven projects. You know, when we use the word relocation, it's a little buzzword that gives me a little bad feeling inside when we think about the other relocation for tribes from years past. These ideas for tribes to relocate come from within their communities, and so we want to be as supportive as we possibly can.
So I would like to see a real commitment, especially in the context of Sachin country, to, if we really care about that species, we need to do something to make those fires smaller. And fuels is the thing. We won't get into grazing and all that other sort of stuff. And I don't see a real big thing other than the infrastructure piece where there's there because, and you say, well, yeah, whatever. Why do we care about that? We care about that because the chairman intimated in Idaho that's a big deal. I'll tell you what, if you list the greater sage grouse in my neck of the woods, you've shut the state down. You don't own, but the federal government owns north of 80% of it. Grazing, mining, recreation, all that stuff. It's like, endangered species, timeout. It's like, have a nice day with anything resembling multiple use. Oh, by the way, you can still hunt sage hen in Nevada. They're not a threat for me because I can't shoot very well. I could shoot at them all day long and not hurt one. But it's my time, please. And therefore, it just covers so many things in the West. And when we look at what we went through with Secretary Jewell to create this stuff, it really seems to me like what's going on now is both sides of your mouth. There was a big hug fest in Denver, and state governors were there. Everybody loved everybody. It's like, oh, by the way, we're taking this back. It just, none of it connects for me, and I'm concerned about it. So anything on fuels?
Congressman, yes.
And I'll end my rant with that.
I appreciate it, and of course, we understand and thank you for speaking so frankly with us. As far as fuel goes, $288 million for fuels, that's $74 million above 2024 enacted. And it includes $25 million in base supplemental pay increases for firefighters, together with bill funds that will treat 1.8 million acres in 2025.
And I appreciate that.
And-
I would just say this. If we're really worried about that species, then maybe that ought to have some targeting language in it.
Are you aware of a local minor baseball team called the Glacier Riders, Range Riders? Well, are you aware that your department's litigation over the Glacier Range Riders logo? Are you aware that your department is litigating over their logo?
Congressman, I believe the name changes go to the Board of Geographic Names.
Nothing to do with name change, it's a logo. Are you aware that your department is in litigation?
I
Yes or
will
no,
be-
ma'am?
No, I'm not
Okay.
aware.
All right. Are you aware that the arrowhead is oftentimes used as a logo in many organizations?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Well, let me give you an example of an arrowhead being used as logos for those Kansas City guys. This is a numerous, and there are high schools, et cetera, that all use the logos. So my point is gathering, have you also understand that the Government Patent Office has twice ruled against your department on that the glacier riders do not violate the patent. So are you aware of that? And yes or no, and I would assume it would be no, I don't want to answer for you.
Congressman, just to be clear, I'm not aware of anything with
Okay.
the range riders.
Well, and this is the problem as a secretary, because sometimes a large department does harm to local entities, like the baseball team, and I'll go further. I'm going to read a missive from your attorneys sent to the baseball team after the U.S. Patent Office said twice that it's not a violation of the logo. So what you demanded was a sample of each label, tag, sticker, container, package, box, packaging insert, point of sale display, and brochure ever used, sold to be considered for use or sale, bearing the Range Riders logo. To be clear, the request would also cover production of each and every item sold, contemplated for sale, as well as packaging. Do you think that that is a reasonable thing to ask of a Glacier minor league Range Riders baseball team?
Congressman, I am not allowed to comment on ongoing litigation.
Well, I'm allowed to comment on this, is that your budget has requested more funds, significantly more funds. And yet, that action has resulted in at least $500,000 of expenses to a minor league team that's just trying to throw a pitch. But when you ask me for more money, and yet you prioritize this, I'm going to question it. And it's my right and my duty as a congressman to question it.
This signals a move away from multiple use and instead looks to be arbitrarily excluding areas from potential oil and gas lease sales, which is unprecedented. Never happened before until now. So what is different now to push DOI to move away from multiple use?
Congressman, thank you for the question. And we do have a multiple use mandate for our public lands, and that's what we do.
Okay. Why is DOI then moving to exclude the proposed Riceswell critical habitat area, even though that critical habitat has not yet been finalized?
I'm happy to get back with you on that specific question, Congressman, if you were seeking data or something of that nature. But I will say that we are very careful about how we are moving our clean energy transition forward. And I also want to say that with respect to offshore wind, we have a large number of conversations with stakeholders, and we absolutely speak with many people before we make any decisions of that kind.
Okay, well, with the Riceswell critical habitat area, the ruling has to be made before you can block it. If you block it before the ruling is made, then that's definitely not going off the science. And to do so preemptively shows a bias against oil and gas production in that area, barring none, because you just want to. Mm-hmm. Will you commit to a lease sale for 262?
Congressman, we are going to operate within the law, and
Get to yes. Come on. Let me hear
and
yes.
I-
Commit to the lease sale that's required on the 5-year plan.
We are going to do everything that we're required to do with respect to our energy needs. in this country. I know Congress it has mandated us to have lease sales. We're going to have those.
Last month, the administration released a decision reversing the Critical Endangered Species Act reforms implemented during the previous administration, reinstating the blanket 4D rule, which automatically provides for endangered level protections to species listed only as threatened. I have heard concerns that this change will lead us to less flexibility for landowners and stakeholders and could tie up landowners in mountains of unnecessary bureaucratic red tape, ceasing any economic progress for rural communities across the United States. Can you walk us through what these changes are and how they will improve the Endangered Species Act? And what resources has the department provided to private landowners to understand this rulemaking? And did the department consider the negative impacts related to economic development associated with this rulemaking?
Thank you, Congressman. So the Fish and Wildlife Service finalized 3 rules to restore protections for species in their habitats, strengthen processes for listing, designating critical habitats, and consultation with federal partners. The changes do not further impede on private landowners' rights. Rules are not expected to change the number or frequency of listings and delistings, the total amount or area of critical habitat designated, the rate or frequency of Section 7 consultation, or the resulting conclusion. The rules do provide clearer, straightforward regulations to recover listed species and protect critical habitats for Section 7 consultations, species classification, and critical habitat. And there is a separate rule finalized to encourage participation in voluntary collaborative conservation with resource managers and landowners. I know that we are always in contact with stakeholders whenever any of these issues come to light. So I want to assure you that we operate in a transparent manner and certainly do welcome those comments.
I appreciate that, but there's a difference in being in contact with local stakeholders and listening to local stakeholders.
We listen.
Two difference.
We do listen.
And because they ought to have some input in this, but it sounds to me like it's not going to change anything. If it's not going to change anything, then why the hell are we doing it?
Thank you, Congressman. We're doing it because I think it will make things better.
Okay, well,
Clarify some certain things.
we'll have a discussion on this later.
Great Smoky Mountains National Park is the 3rd most visited national park in 2023, and yet another one of my district's greatest wonders. In both instances, the parkway and the park struggle with deferred maintenance and repair projects. And without asking for more money, Madam Secretary, can you explain how the Department of Interior determines how much funding that each national park receives annually? Is it formula-based, or is there some other process that you use to prioritize where the available funds are distributed?
Thank you very much, Congressman. And I've been to both the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Great Smoky Mountains. And the Great Smoky Mountains from your state is adjacent to the Eastern Band of Cherokee Nation. So
Yes.
There's an entrance right there, and I saw some wild turkeys running around. It was very nice. So I can give you an idea.
Did you miss the elk?
I didn't see any elk during that visit.
We've
but-
replenished the elk population. You'd really enjoy seeing that
Oh,
too.
excellent. Well, it is truly beautiful. And so in my travels, of course, you see that the funding that we give to national parks is well spent, and it's needed and necessary and all of that. So I can give you an idea of the type of funding parks in your area receive. Our fiscal year 2025 budget requests for annual appropriations include $20 million for Blue Ridge, $23.7 for Great Smoky Mountains, which is $1.5 million above 2023. Also through the Great American Outdoors Act Legacy Restoration Fund program, $185 million already received for multiple projects at Blue Ridge, $35 million to replace the Laurel Fork Bridge. Work is underway, $150 million to reconstruct sections of the parkway. Work is underway, and $35 million to rehab park roads at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Of course, different parks require different types of funding or different levels of funding due to what their infrastructure needs are. And so I can't tell you how the whole, how everything is figured out. That's a question for the National Park Service Director. However, we do take those under consideration.
When I was secretary, we established a multi-agency task force to address drug trafficking and Indian human trafficking. It was comprised of elements from your department, BLM, U.S. Park Service, U.S. Park Police, FBI, BIA, and the idea was to augment and supplement in coordination with the tribes. The tribes requested it. We provided the service in coordination with the tribes to go after exactly what we talked about: drugs, human trafficking, where are the kids going? So when you took office, you discontinued that, even though it was incredibly successful, and the numbers and the amount of fentanyl and drugs confiscated is not in dispute. Why?
Congressman, I appreciate the question, and I recognize that perhaps we have different leadership styles. I appreciate your service to our
Ask you
country
directly,
as the
was it
Secretary of the Interior.
because it was a Trump administration? Because almost everything the Trump administration did, you immediately ended, whether it was good or bad or indifferent.
That's
so
not
why?
altogether true, honestly. That's not true.
Were you aware you discontinued this?
However, we are.
Madam Secretary, were you aware that the task force was discontinued when you took office?
I was not aware of the task force, your task force, Congressman. However, we are working very hard to ensure that we are providing the necessary services to Indian
Would
country.
you agree that perhaps a task force that had the FBI, BIA, BLM, U.S. Park Service
I really appreciate
together,
that.
would you agree that such a task force would be helpful to Indian nations?
Congressman, would you like us to contact your office and
I'm just
have a
asking you, do you think it would be
conversation about
helpful?
this?
Yeah, you can't answer whether a task force with multiple law enforcement agencies in coordination with Indian country wouldn't be helpful in addressing some of the issue about drug trafficking, child trafficking, indigenous personnel missing or killed.
I truly do appreciate that suggestion, Congressman, and we appreciate it.
The science will say in Glacier Park, which the glaciers are melting, absolutely. I've been on the glaciers, eating lunch. I've witnessed the recede of the glacier. It started 10,000 years ago. Sea level rise has been the same for about 7,000 years, more or less. Hurricanes, the frequency. Madam Secretary, are you aware that the frequencies of hurricanes has neither increased nor decreased in frequency and number of times in the last 400 years?
Every time a hurricane happens,
Are you aware that the frequency
seemingly-
has gone up or down, or do you believe it has? I'm just curious.
I believe that the storms have gotten more intense, stronger storms than
I will give you
they
that
were
data, and it's
before.
science. So do I agree that erosion and tides have an enormous effect on Maine and its beautiful coastline? Absolutely. Do I think that our older buildings are at risk? Because it is changing. And should we address them? Yeah, because there's buildings and structures that are absolutely worth saving in this country, and tradition is part of it. So I'll work with you, but science is science, and science is the same in the great state of Maine as in Montana. So with that, thank you, Madam Secretary, and if you would, I am going to scrutinize your legal department to see where you're spending. I think having to get a Major League Baseball team at $500,000 to spend money over a logo that has twice been ruled by the governing authority not to be a logo infringement, I think is atrocious. This committee stands adjourned.